Welcome to Stream, a TrucktractorTrailer.com production. My name is Zach Miller. I'm your host, and since it is Father's Day weekend this weekend, we thought who better to have on than my father, Arthur Miller. Dad, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, son. Thanks, Zach. It is a pleasure, and it's a pleasure to be with you, and it's a pleasure to work with you.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that. We've been working together for about I think it's going on 8 years now, actually, in December, which is pretty crazy. I certainly had a lot more hair when I started. Your hair's still, about the same as I recall. But yeah, trucking will do that to you. Let's be honest about that. But Dad, let's actually talk about that. How you got your start in the trucking industry, because certainly coming out of law school, you didn't anticipate becoming a trucking expert, an expert in trucking and transportation law.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I mean, even before law school, I was always interested in sort of helping people and, helping companies, deal with government and, wade through issues. And that's one of the reasons why I went to law school. And, through a couple of different stints, I wound up, I certainly did some work with construction firms and the like, but I wound up as the sort of safety, in-house safety person for a firm in the trash business. But it was more than that. Certainly the resume says it's environmental compliance, but they had regular route structure where they pick up from customers, but they had interstate hauling where they would, under contracts with different state and local agencies, they would take trash or recyclables to, from one place to another under contract. So they had over the road people, they had fleets of tractor trailers and regular garbage trucks, and they had recycling, and they had roll-offs, and they worked in a couple of states, and they did construction. So it was fascinating. And in the couple of years that I was there, I really got involved with DOT issues, all sorts of tickets and different kinds of responses, whether it was environmental issues or things like overweights or keeping the drivers working. So it was fascinating, and that really sort of led me into that career.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny too, because they needed you back then because there are so many regulations that were changing all at once, and it feels like we're kind of in a deja vu situation right now. I think there are so many regulations that are kind of changing all at once, and trucking is always at the forefront of a lot of these regulatory changes, and I do feel like it is. It's hard for these drivers and for these fleet managers to really catch their breath, because they're hit with so many different regulations, fines, fees. It's kind of like this never-ending tide, so to speak.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, if you're a trucker, if you're a driver, you've got a target on your back, and especially these days, especially with these nuclear verdicts and things, there's a whole group of the personal injury lawyers and others who really try to make driving a commercial vehicle seem like evil incarnate, and they know they can get it. I mean, like as I said, you definitely have a mark. So but just quickly on sort of on the history, a lot of things start with the bigger firms, and then there's sort of a trickle down. But the smaller firms, or the owner operators, the individual drivers, by the time it gets to them, a lot of these things have already been worked out, and then it's very hard for the individual, for the small fleets, and for the individual drivers or the owner operators, because if they don't stay on top of things, the laws will affect them without their knowing it. So
yeah, and I mean, and that's really a good point to jump in here and say, this is how you and I started working together, because we noticed that there wasn't really a mechanism to provide that information to the owner operators and the, you know, the smaller fleets about everything that they need to know. I mean, you know, you and I obviously focus on New York City and the metro area, but as people like to say, you know, every bad idea has its start in New York City, and it tends to matriculate around the country pretty quickly. So it you know, and working with TrucktractorTrailer.com, they're hardcore advocates for the owner operator and for the small fleet, and it's just so nice to be able to really start building and having coalitions of like-minded people who are looking out for these hard workers that as we've seen the last 15 months, you know, heroically keep this economy afloat and keep it moving through some of the worst times we've had.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's so important, and really, you know, it's hard to just stay on top of things, and you know, just to give you an idea, you know, especially if you are a fleet of some size, meaning, you know, 2 or more vehicles, even, you know,
Yeah.
you got to worry about your drivers being able to drive. I'm helping out a company now where they couldn't figure out why the driver's license was revoked, and it had to do with his own personal problems with operating without insurance and not paying the bill, and then the car was repoed and things like that, and you know, just a hell of a time just trying to get this guy legalized. So you know, that's one of the things we do also, is because you know, you can't stay on top of everything, including your key people. If they're you know, when they're not working, you got to worry about them, because if they're disqualified, all of a sudden you're without that person that you're expecting to work. And you know, given my background, I'm very fond of saying there are a lot of firms that I represent that may not even know that they're trucking companies. And you know, so you know, it's best when they come to me. You know, it's like, you know, the person who bakes muffins, let's say, and has a couple of vans to deliver them to delis and things like that. That person doesn't necessarily think of himself as a trucking company until he starts getting written up, or he has certain rules that he has to follow. So you know, it's very important, you know, to stay on top of this, or work with people that do stay on top of it.
100%. I think that that's such a key point, and I think that that's one of the sort of maybe inefficiency isn't exactly the right word, but I think that that's one of the disconnect. I think that's one of the disconnect between regulators and elected officials when it comes to, you know, quote unquote trucking. You have so many businesses that rely on commercial vehicles, you know, and that can mean so many different things. And the industry, I think, unfortunately gets pigeonholed into this one, you know, trucking is one thing, and oftentimes it's represented by the big firms, you know, your UPS, your FedEx, now certainly your Amazon. People see that and they say, well, that's trucking, and of course it is, but there's so much more to it than that. That's really just, you know, it's funny, the big companies really are the tip of the iceberg. The actual industry itself is really what's underneath the surface, and that's to your point of they may not even really know they're a trucking company.
Right. I mean, the person who comes to fix your toilet may have a van with a commercial plate, and they may be a trucking company, or if it's, you know, certainly if it's a larger vehicle, you know, there are more rules to follow, and certainly within New York, there are parking rules, there are engine idling rules, there are tax stickers, and all sorts of things that could lead to problems.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting. I mean, that's something that probably people who jump into this right now may not realize, but you need to really know the vehicle traffic law for the jurisdiction that you want to be hauling freight in. You know, if you're going into trucking, and certainly you should probably consult with the lawyer who's you know, experienced in this first, just to make sure you know, you're in compliance with a lot of these regulations that you probably never even heard about.
No, it's very true, you know, and I like to feel, you know, certainly that my role in part is education, and I also try to help companies, especially we do New York City parking tickets, and Zach, you're involved in that as well. And there are a lot of issues just to park. And what many don't realize, if your firm, let's say, and it's illegal to park at a fire hydrant. Let me rephrase it. If you're an individual, it's your own truck, and you're going to get hit with a $115 fine for parking at a fire hydrant, you're going to avoid that hydrant. Well, a lot of times if it's one of your employees who says, "Look, I've got X number of stops to make. I don't care if the company gets the ticket." So sometimes then that's a labor issue where you could say, "Hey, listen, you get 1 or 2 passes, but if you keep getting certain kinds of tickets, we're going to make you pay." So that's something that can be structured. It's an agreement. It's discussions. Just like look, these days, if you have CDLs, you have to have the drug testing program. You make people sign. You make your drivers sign the agreement that how you can do the random testing and things like that. So this is all something you have to do. But there was a long haul, forgive the pun, just until you can put all of those things in place. And you had to make sure that drivers know, if they're working for a company, that drivers know that here are the company rules. And sometimes those company rules are enforced, because if the company's going to get hit with fines because the driver wants to do things his or her own way, that becomes a labor issue.
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm glad you threw in a pun, though. We had to have a dad joke on Father's Day. I mean, that was a necessity.
I wouldn't have fulfilled my parental obligation.
But the last point I really do want to bring up, because this is new too, and again, we're seeing this throughout the country starting now, is the electronic toll. Well, electronic enforcement. That goes camera enforcement. In New York, they just passed a law to have a pilot program on the BQE that's going to do camera weight enforcement, and of course, cashless tolling. These sort of camera related issues are starting to pop up, and they're pretty significant for the fleets that aren't exactly paying attention to it.
Right. And, there's a huge problem with, this data-driven stuff, because there's plenty of opportunities for errors and misreads, and you have to stay on top of your billing, and then also trying to correct it. I mean, I think almost by design, they let the private companies that run these things also handle their own dispute resolution situations. So it becomes hard to assert your rights. I had one client, actually, she handled it herself, but she noticed all this overbilling on her Easy Pass, and she actually got the agency to agree they were going to refund her about $7,000, but it took months. So I finally, when she came to me, I put her in touch with her local elected official who was able to help light a fire under the agency, because the agency said in writing, "We're going to pay you." And it's just they were taking months. So you have to stay on top of these things.
It's unbelievable. It really is. But I also, I mean, that's sort of back to the full point of, you're running a truck. You have a target on your back that you don't even realize. I mean, it's one thing to sort of be cognizant of if there's a police officer, if maybe you're on the highway and they're doing speed checks, things that might seem a little bit more normal, but something like thousands and thousands of dollars in fines from a cashless tolling violation. I mean, there's no way that owner operators can be on top of something like that.
No, I agree. And, and Zach and I together, we're privileged to work with the Trucking Association of New York and some other associations. And, and the stories we hear are incredible. So, it helps us to talk about it. But I'll give you an example. New York City parking tickets, where some firms are going back and then looking at their GPS and say, wait a minute, this ticket was issued in Manhattan, but I can show that my truck was in Staten Island at the time. So they're even with all of these sort of digital things, there's there are all sorts of problems. What's one we're hearing now on Easy Pass? Some company has a fleet of trucks. There's a Jeep passenger vehicle that's mysteriously showing up on it. So there's
Yeah,
all sorts of problems which you have to be alert to. And if you're not able to stay on top of it, yourself all the time, there are resources such as calling myself or being involved with associations and things like that.
absolutely. You could, and for owner operators, OIDA, AAOO, those are great. Those are great associations that specifically cater to owner operators, to small fleets. You might want to check them out, because as Arthur says, you cannot possibly stay on top of all these issues. Your focus is on driving, is on keeping the vehicle on the road, the wheels moving, hauling your freight. That's what you need to do. You need to find yourself allies, such as associations, such as expert attorneys, to be there with you. That's how you keep your business afloat. Dad, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Yeah, no, definitely. We'll play this at the Father's Day barbecue. I'm sure Mom will get a kick out of it. A couple of beers and we're ready to go. You could check out Arthur Miller at NewYorkTruckStop.com, New York Truck Stop Radio. And please be sure to like, subscribe, and share these stream videos. Thanks for listening in, and we'll see you next time.